The 1000-Year Blood War arc of Bleach really lived up to its name by having a ton of frankly awesome fights, but which of those battles rises to the top to be the absolute greatest of them all? Well, I'm going to attempt to answer that question by ranking what I believe to be are the 13 best fights to have come out of the final arc of Bleach. Now, a list like this is of course my own opinion, but I would love to hear yours in the comments below. Let me know which of the fights from the 1000-Year Blood War you liked the most. And of course, as well with a video like this, there will be full and complete spoilers for the 1000-Year Blood War arc of Bleach, so you've been warned ahead of time. Before we get started on the video, guys, if you haven't hit subscribe yet, make sure to do that now for more Bleach content like this every single week. And if you enjoyed the video, make sure to give it a thumbs up as well, as it does help to support me and the channel, and I would well and truly appreciate it. And if you really like what I do here and you want to take that support from me another step further, we have a Patreon for the channel as well. You can get videos like this one early, and you can support me for as little as $1 a month. Everyone who's coming up on screen right now is currently a patron of this channel, and they are helping to support it, they're helping keeping it running, and I really appreciate each and every one of you, so thank you all so much. Now, there are tons of fights in the final arc of Bleach, which makes total sense because obviously it's a full-scale war, but it was surprisingly difficult to whittle it down to just 13. But at the end of the day, I'm pretty happy with the list I've come up with. I'm not necessarily expecting it to be ubiquitously the same as everybody else's lists, but I think I'm pretty content with the way things turned out. So, in 13th place, we have really the first major battle of the final arc. Ichigo Kurosaki and the Arrancar versus Sternritter J, the Jail, Kirige OP, in an effort to defend Hueco Mundo from this madman, this domineering authoritarian villain who really puts forth the best and worst of the Vandenreich in really the coolest way possible. Kirige is a fantastic villain to open this arc with. He's scary, he is just completely dominating the Arrancar as they try and protect their homeland, and Ichigo and his friends arrive, and it's just really cool seeing them teaming up with their previous enemies to protect the previous enemy territory from an all-new, potentially even worse villain. So it's really cool seeing the spectacle of the Tre Bestia summoning Ion to bring down Kirige in his holy form, Kirige using his power of Sclave to strip Ion down to the bone and turn into some kind of wicked monstrosity, and finally seeing Ichigo going toe-to-toe with him in his Bankai in a desperate attempt to protect the Arrancar and his friends. What I love about this fight so much is that battles like these really show how the world of Bleach has progressed since that last major story arc. And of course, the ending of this fight is fantastic as well, showing Ichigo attempting to flee to try and save the Soul Society, only for Kirige to stop him in his tracks with his ability, the Jail. It's a gripping ending to an awesome fight, and then of course, Kirige is killed from behind by a mysterious assailant who would turn out to be an absolute fan favourite returnee. In 12th place, we have a real personal favourite of mine, being Seijin Komamura versus Bambietta Bastabine. This is the emotional conclusion to Seijin's subplot after he loses his Bankai. He tears out his own heart, speaking with his great-grandfather, which again is a really cool lore piece for this character, and we get a brilliant, if very one-sided battle against Bambietta, where we get one of the best twists of the arc as well, revealing that after tearing out his heart, Komamura has now become a human, if for a very short amount of time. One of the best twists in the 1000-Year Blood War arc right there. And this fight is brief, and again, like I said, one-sided, but it is, I think, very emotional, and I think that works really well here. It's great seeing Komamura's journey pay off like this, seeing him turn into an immortal golem-like figure and bringing down Bambietta, even in her holy form, with relative ease, is again quite satisfying to see. It's nice to see Komamura so on top of things for once, and his human form is absolutely badass as well. Bambietta is also very cool in this fight, even though, like I said, she is basically on the back foot for the entirety of it, but it's really cool seeing her making the most of her Shrift, the Explode, and of course, to top it all off, we get Komamura's really cool, really fantastic looking new version of his Bankai Kokujo Tengen Myo Dangai Joe, which just looks so imposing and frightening, and the way Bambietta elicits that fear It's so great to see. The only real downside to this fight is that despite kind of sacrificing everything, Komamura still can't be given a clean break. He still can't be given a genuine guaranteed win. And what makes it even worse is that Bambietta would return in some form after this fight, even if that form is not a particularly nice one for her. Whereas this is basically it for Komamura's screen time in this arc. So it's a well-deserved victory for Komamura. He looks fantastic while it's happening. It just unfortunately costs him an awful lot to get there. But regardless, I do love the emotional payoff for this fight. One of my favourite Komamura lines ever is when he says, you know, when I stepped foot on this battlefield, I left my life behind, as he just destroys Bambietta with her own bomb. Really cool stuff. I think that's going to be spectacular to see in the anime. Coming in at number 11 is, in my opinion, a fairly similar fight to the last one, being very emotional and quite short. There's not really much actual fighting going on here, but of course the battle I'm talking about is Sternritter H, the Heat Basby, versus Sternritter B, the Balance Ugrum Hashwolf. And of course, this fight really was a big surprise, I think, to everybody, and I think many of us were really hoping at this point in the story that we would get some kind of Sternritter Vandenreich backstory, considering we'd been basically running on empty this entire time. But what we got from Kubo's Friend saga, which lasted about 4 chapters, was better, I think, than really anyone could have hoped for. And the actual fight between these two former friends is, again, kind of heart-wrenching. It's very, very emotional. I think Kubo himself has even said he thinks this is the emotional high point of the arc. Like, this is the biggest kind of tearjerker moment of the 1,000-Year Blood War. And I can see where he's coming from. And it is a really cool fight, seeing Basby going through the motions, upping each stage of Burner Finger, basically, until he eventually uses Burning Full Fingers. Watching Ugrum clearly not wanting to fight this guy, realising that Basby is no match for him, and eventually having to put him in his place. The ending of this fight, like I've said before, really riffs on the endings of fights like Ichigo versus Ginjo, Byakuya versus Renji, where you get those drawn-out, emotional defeats, and it's really great seeing Basby sort of staggering and grabbing Ugrum's lapel and being like, oh, I really thought losing to you would just feel so much worse than this, as he collapses to the ground. Really well done, and it introduced some much-needed humanity to villains who had otherwise been seriously lacking in it. So this is a really great fight all around, and a very nice surprise so late into the arc. And now we're into the top 10, and for number 10, maybe this is going to be controversial, though I'm not entirely sure, but for me it's Kenpachi Zaraki versus Sternritter V, the Visionary Gremmy Thamo. I have my issues with this fight, which is why it's potentially low down on this list, although it still makes the top 10 of fights in the final arc. And what it does well, it does really well, which of course is spectacle and bombast, which, you know, is par for the course with Zaraki fights, really. Gremmy having the ability that he has means that Kubo was able to get pretty wild with the powers on show here. If it's just Gremmy summoning a wave of lava towards Zaraki, or trapping him in a watery cube, or even going so far as to summon an earth-destroying meteor, or even trapping Zaraki within the void of space. There's a lot of really cool stuff going on here. But what makes this fight really special, I think, is that it feels like Zaraki himself has actually come a long way. This fight feels like real character development for Zaraki. He is tutoring Gremmy as the fight goes on. Gremmy doesn't really understand what it means to fight, what it means to want to fight, despite being as powerful as he is, and so it's really kind of cathartic to see Zaraki passing on that knowledge, egging Gremmy on, getting him to do more, getting him to fight more, getting him to push harder against Zaraki, who is of course like an immovable wall. And to top it all off, we get the extraordinarily long-awaited reveal of Kenpachi's Shikai no Zarashi, which again is really fantastic, but also where my major issues with this fight come in. I think the pacing is totally off in this battle, which really brings it down. It just lasts forever until Zaraki activates Shikai, and that's when the fight really gets going. You know, crazy stuff starts happening. Gremmy summons loads of himself, trapping Zaraki, like I said, in space, and then the fight just ends, just as it's getting good. And that's what really kind of bothers me about this battle. That and Gremmy himself kind of exists within a vacuum just for the purpose of this fight. But overall, it's a really great battle. Again, a nice spectacle that I think will look really good in the anime, and I think Gremmy will probably be a favourite Sternritter. And of course, everyone loves Zaraki, and seeing him as a slightly changed man, announcing himself as the Kenpachi at the start of this fight, is all really good growth for this character. Coming in at number 9 on this list, we have literally the final battle of Bleach. Ichigo Kurosaki, Aizen Sosuke Uryu Ishida, Renji Abarai versus Yhwach himself. This is such a weird one for me. This is a really strange one to try and rank. There's no denying the hype fest that is seeing Aizen freed from his bindings and actually fighting on the side of good against Yhwach. That's fan fiction as far as I'm concerned. I love that. I've been wanting to see that. Ichigo and Aizen working together to bring down this deity-like being as he literally destroys the Soul Society around them is really awesome. And obviously, you get the great moment with Uryu coming in to effectively deliver that decisive blow that wipes out Yhwach's powers. Say what you will about the still silver arrow, which I imagine maybe knocks this fight down for some people, but I do think that moment where Yhwach is stricken with the effects of his own Ausvalen is very satisfying to see. It's like the souls of all the Quincy that he has tormented in the past are coming back finally in this crucial moment to stick it to him big time. And obviously Aizen has the crowning moment of excellence in this fight when Yhwach believes that he is killing Ichigo Kurosaki, only for Aizen to appear in front of him with that glorious smirk, allowing Ichigo to land a devastating Getsuga Tensho. That's all really good stuff. This fight is frenetic, chaotic, and it gets going from the word go, which I think a final battle absolutely should. So why is it only at 9th? If it feels like it's got everything I want from a fight like this, that craziness, Aizen using Hado 99, well, the obvious answer is it's way too short. Way too short. This actual fight itself is maybe 2 chapters long, and when you're giving us something that good, I want this to be a full battle. I want to see everyone going crazy and it actually feeling like a final fight more than anything in the world. Especially when I personally am quite disappointed by the Ichigo and Orihime versus Yhwach battle that precedes this. I would rather that was kind of cut in half and more time was given to this one. And in general, I think because of that rushed nature, the chaotic nature of the fight makes it feel a little bit messy to me. And so for me, that's why it is kind of brought down to this level. There's a lot of things I think that could be done to neaten this fight up a little bit. But, at the end of the day, it's still never going to be old seeing Aizen fighting alongside Ichigo, seeing him freed of his chair and swaggering towards Yhwach, being like, now I can stop you. That is just pure badass. And it feels like Kubo was, knowing that the series was so close to its end, was like, I can try and give the fans something they will love for this very short amount of time. And I think that is what we get. I would just have loved way, way more of it. Now, coming in at number 8 is a fight that I really didn't like when it first came out, or at least half of it anyway. And I've grown over the years to appreciate it considerably more to the point where it's now one of my favourites. And that's Rukia Kuchiki versus Sternritter F. the Fear Asnot. And that's because Az is one of my absolute favourite characters to come out of this final arc, and I was really excited to see what he would bring to the table. And it always felt to me like Kubo severely nerfed him at the start of this fight to make him way less imposing than he was in the first Quincy invasion. That being said, it's really cool seeing Rukia utilising the new and true powers of her Sode no Shirayuki, which moves it away from being a typical ice Zanpakuto to one that is more about low temperatures and pure cold, which I think is really, really badass and a great way of differentiating it from Hyorin Maru, for instance. Az's Volstendig, Tata Foraz, is one of the best looking designs to come out of the final arc I have ever seen, and completely redeemed what I thought was a slightly lackluster first half of the fight, where Rukia just basically totally dominates Az with her newfound powers, which again, with the whole, now that I've got the whole fight as a package in front of me, I don't mind anywhere near as much. I was just really worried the fight was going to be a total steamroll like Renji versus Master Masculine was, but this is definitely a better, I think, slightly better fight between the two of them. Az gets Rukia on the ropes at one point, but Byakuya arrives to give her that kind of last push that she needs. I think if Byakuya had killed Az here, it would have really damaged this fight irreparably. But the fact that both Kubo and Byakuya give Rukia the chance to finish the fight that she started is wonderful. And really, it's the ending of this fight that's my absolute favourite part, where Rukia unveils, of course, her extremely well-deserved Bankai, Haka no Togame. One of the most, stunningly beautiful scenes in the final arc is her activating this, becoming this ice princess, wielding this glass-like blade, and destroying the fear-driven Az's final grotesque form. That is really great stuff, and getting that final development between her and Byakuya, where he acknowledges her strength, he leaves it in her hands to defeat his tormentor, is really great stuff. And so for me, a fight that I used to be very conflicted about, I actually now really like. And I like the beginning sections where they're battling each other. It feels like a very stereotypical Bleach fight. They're kind of discussing their powers and stuff like that. And yeah, overall, I think this is a really good one. I think in Japan, they voted this like their second favourite fight in the entire series or something like that. That's a little bit much for me, but I have grown to really like this fight now that we've kind of got the whole context available to us. Coming in at number 7, we have really the fight that capped off the first Quincy invasion. It was really everything that mini-arc was building towards. Ichigo and Yhwach might have a small skirmish after the fact, but this is the fight that Kubo was building to that entire time, and really was building to ever since the start of the final arc itself, being, of course, Yamamoto Shigekuni Genryusai versus versus Sternritter Y, the Yourself Roidloid. And that right there is the reason this is at 7 for me and not higher. I despise the Roidloid twist. I just think it's really dumb, kind of just very convenient that there happened to be a twin brother of Lloyd, who already sounds absolutely ridiculous in the first place, and who can mimic powers and memories and the appearance of people and stuff like that. In my opinion, this fight should have been really emotional, a really emotional send-off for Yamamoto, because it kind of felt obvious that he wasn't going to make it out alive at the end of it. And what we get is a fantastic showcase for our former Captain Commander. We see his Bankai again, massively long-awaited Zanka no Tachi, and we really see it. We see it in all of its glory, which felt like the best thing Kubo could do. But to reveal in the end that Yamamoto has, been using all of his powers, all of his energy against nothing more than a mere clone that feels like a very cheap get-out-of-jail card, that was disappointing to me. I think personally, what I would have done is just have Yhwach be strong enough to defeat Yamamoto, but really have them engage in fisticuffs. Yhwach should have been this warlord-type villain who wasn't afraid to get on the front lines and get bloodied up, and actually just take the fight to Yamamoto himself. That being said, I appreciate that Yamamoto has always been so powerful that the enemy needs some kind of trickery to defeat him. I just think with the final arc, and with Yamamoto's final greatest showing, that didn't need to be a necessity here. Because Yhwach was a new character, people could have bought the fact that he was strong enough to defeat Yamamoto in this instance. But regardless of how I feel about the ending, there's no denying that the art is completely top tier in this fight. The expressions, the emotions on Yamamoto's face etched into his features are fantastic. And of course, his Bankai is brilliant. And the way it actually lived up to the hype, I think, again, was just so well done. So this fight more than deserves its place on the list. And coming in at number 6 is a battle that we've actually talked about fairly recently on this channel, being one of the fights against the Schutzstoffel, Kyoraku Shunsui, and Nanao Issei versus Sternritter X, the X-Axis Lille Barrow. This is a fantastic fight. I do really love it, and of course I've talked about it in length as a battle analysis. I think this fight can be easily split into 3/3. As I mentioned earlier in that video, it's one of the longest fights in the entire series. And I think at least the first 2/3 of this battle are a great showcase for our new Captain Commander. Kyoraku Shunsui, one of my favourite characters in the entire series, gets a brilliant showing here, really setting the stage for this ultra sinister but playful fight. His Shikai really again coming into its own, and of course we see another hugely anticipated Bankai in Katen Kyokotsu Karamatsu Shinju. And Leal Barrow himself is also a pretty cool character. He's very, very powerful, comes across as very imposing, and his Volstendig Ziliel is pretty cool to see as well. But this fight undeniably kind of falls apart a little bit once Nanao arrives to join in. Once Kyoraku has been unable to kill Leal, even by cutting off his head, maybe you're going a little bit too far. Nanao's Shinken Hakkyoken is a deus ex machina that really feels like it comes out of nowhere to deal with a problem that's otherwise unsolvable, and it does feel a little bit like it takes away a very hard-earned victory from Kyoraku. But as I mentioned in that video as well, I think there's a victory here for both of these characters as they come together to deal with this divine, godlike owl being, who alone neither of them could probably defeat, but together they managed to bring him down. So, for me, this is again, another emotional battle. It feels very intimate. It feels like these characters really come together for a good old-fashioned Bleach fight that kind of goes off the rails a little bit towards the end. But at the same time, I really do appreciate getting the insight, the analysis into Kyoraku and Nanao as characters, that deepening of their relationship. And again, there's just some really fantastic imagery on show, with Katen arriving, with Kyoraku's Bankai going into the shadow world, Leal's forms, apart from the ridiculousness of the epilogue of this fight, which again also does bring it down a little bit for me, but on the whole this is a great battle, in the very final throes of the final arc. But now we arrive at the top 5, and in 5th place we have a battle that I really just love, and again I wasn't expecting to get when the final arc began, and that's Saraki Kenpachi versus Yachiru Unohana. I think again this is going to be an extremely popular fight. Even though some people might be divided over the ending, I do think this battle is nearly perfect. I love the stakes in this battle. You know, it feels very high stakes. You have Kyoraku theorizing that because this is a clash of bloodthirsty Kenpachi monsters, that only one of them is going to walk away from this thing alive in the end. And it's again a vessel for an amazing twist. Again, one of the best in the series, the discovery that Unohana, this kindly, matronly captain, was actually the very first Kenpachi and a bloodthirsty criminal, was just again fantastically well handled. This battle between captains is a sword fight at its finest as well, with some wonderful, almost dance-like flowing choreography on show here, in an arc that doesn't really have too many traditional sword-on-sword battles. So this is a really good one. It's brutal, it's visceral, there's a lot, just so much blood on show as these two carnivorous creatures tear into one another. We get, of course, the reveal of Unohana's Bankai here as well, as mysterious as that may be. But this is all round just a fantastic display of artistry from Kubo. I love seeing these two characters battling with a love, a sheer joy for battle on their faces twisting and contorting as their vice captains wait in the wings, desperate for news on the outcome. Again, it feels very emotional. I think it's just incredibly well done. It's probably my favourite Zaraki fight in the series, I think. It's the one that really carries the most weight for him as a character, and it was great to finally see Unohana fight as well. That might be where some people hold some consternation regarding this battle. The fact that she was killed off after it and never actually got to fight any Sternritter is a bit of a disappointment. But for me, I love this fight, and I do think it's overall one of the very best this arc has to offer. Coming in at number 4 on this list is a fight that we're going to be looking at very soon on the channel that I'm very excited about, which is Mayuri Kurotsuchi and Nemu Kurotsuchi versus Sternritter C, the compulsory Pernida Pankajaz. And I mean, boy, I feel like this fight really kind of came out of nowhere, came out swinging hard as one of the absolute best the arc has to offer. Easily one of Mayuri's best fights in the entire series. Up there really with his battle against Uryu, but this is such a great showcase for our favourite mad scientist. The craziest part of this fight is, of course, their enemy, Pernida Pankajaz, who is Bleach at its absolute strangest, its absolute weirdest, unapologetically odd. Mayuri, craves knowledge, craves discovery, takes immense joy in finding something that no one has catalogued before, and so it makes sense that he, of all characters, the chronicler of new findings, would come up against the Soul King's left arm, which after having detached from its former body gained sentience and joined Yuha Bark's Vandenreich as a Quincy itself. And Pernida is just a fascinating character. I don't want to go too deep into this fight because we are going to be doing that very soon. But Pernida is a fascinating character, and actually I think as well this fight is fantastic in the way it is, again, very kinetic, very balanced, very even. It's so cool seeing both parties actually really struggling to, pardon the pun, but gain the upper hand on the other. Great imagery as well here, you know, Mayuri activating his Horenkyaku boots and zipping around the battlefield as 3 of Pernida's arms just blast him with arrows. I really do like this battle a lot. I think it really kind of took me by surprise to see. But in many ways, it makes total sense. What I had wanted for the longest time from a Mayuri battle was for him to actually have to try. Was for Mayuri to actually really struggle and be put on the back foot. And against a constantly evolving monstrosity like Pernida, Mayuri really does struggle. I think there are some fantastic moments in this battle. Like Mayuri thinking he's won, but suddenly an eye opens on this knuckle of a finger that's been disconnected from Pernida's hand, and Mayuri has to react instantly to save his own life. I just think this fight has a real sense of danger. That's probably the best way of putting it, which is absolutely not something I would have ever associated with Mayuri Kurotsuchi. You know, a character who just sails through almost every battle he's in. For him to feel like he is really struggling, that he is in the heat of battle, sweating, I think there are very few fights in the series that feel so naturally oppressive as this one. And I think that's all the better for it. I think it's so good seeing Mayuri and Nemu totally on the back foot all the time. I think that works really well. But it just feels to me again like everything ended up working out very conveniently for Mayuri when it seemed like all hope was lost. You know, Nemu is killed, but luckily for him, Pernida decides to start eating her body. And it's never ever done that before, but I guess, you know, you could attribute that to its evolution and stuff like that. And then all of a sudden, Mayuri's also able to paralyze it as well. I've no idea. But overall, like, really, I just can't fault this fight. It's fantastic. It's great seeing Mayuri on the ropes, having to be really active in a battle, and Pernida is just an all-round terrifying opponent for him to face. Now we arrive at the top 3 best fights in the 1000-year Blood War arc. I've got no idea if these are going to be controversial. I think maybe number 2 might be, but we'll find out. As for number 3, we have the last of the Schutzstaffel fights that managed to make it on this list. Sorry, Gerard. But of course, this is Kisuke Urahara, Yoruichi Shihoin, and Yushiro Shihoin versus Sternritter D, the death-dealing Askin Naklavar, my absolute favourite Sternritter, and one of the best new characters to come out of this arc, no question about it. So maybe there is an element of bias here, but of course this is my list, so if I really, really like one of the characters in this, it's going to make it high up. To add to that, Kisuke is also one of my absolute favourite characters, so when he joined in this fight, I think I audibly cheered. I was so happy to see that that was who Kubo was going to eventually pit against Askin. And Yoruichi as well is a fantastic character, an absolute fan favourite. Their duo is one of the most popular in the series. I don't really care for Yushiro, and as far as I'm concerned, he could have been substituted out for Soifon, seeing as she unceremoniously disappears in this part of the story, and seeing her working with Yoruichi would have been really awesome. But regardless, this is another great fight. It feels out of the Schutzstaffel battles, which are nearly all these just crazy, world-ending fights with immeasurable powers on display, this one is way more grounded. Now, don't mistake that for it's boring, because it's absolutely not. There's still crazy powers on display, but this one is more about the characters, I think. The dialogue exchanges between Askin and Yoruichi, between Askin and Kisuke, they're all so good and it's so much fun. This, again, like I said, feels more like a traditional Bleach fight than really anything else we get at this point in the story outside of that first third of the Kyoraku versus Lille battle, but this time it extends to the whole fight. Obviously, it's amazing getting to see Urahara's Bankai. Again, another very, very long-awaited reveal, and it's one of my favourite Bankais in the series. I think it suits him down to a T, and it is absolutely perfect from a creative standpoint as well. It's really cool getting to see Yoruichi fighting at some kind of higher level than she ever has done before. Her new Shunko techniques all look really great. However, that cat form of hers, while it might be popular with some people, is also a massive point of contention among the Bleach community, and I'm also not really a huge fan of it, as I think there's just way better ways Kubo could have gone about using the exact same form. If Yoruichi had actually just wanted to use it, then I don't think there would be any problem with the fan base whatsoever. But there is this weirdness to their relationship that we've never really seen before that does kind of come out in this fight that I think soured it for a few people. Thankfully, that is only one chapter of an otherwise amazing battle. Obviously, this fight is lifted up massively for me by the inclusion of Kisuke versus Askin to make up those final 3 chapters. I mean, that's pretty much everything I want from a Bleach fight, so it's clearly going to be one of the best for me. And of course, it's, in my opinion as well, got one of the best endings in the entire series. I love that Kisuke outsmarts Askin using his Bankai, Grimmjow coming in for that clutch killing blow at the very end is so good to see as well. Really, this fight feels like just a gathering of fan-favourite characters, including the villain for once. Askin being, just by far the most interesting member of the Schutzstaffel out of all of them. And it's just really, I just love it. I think it's so cool. I think visually it's great seeing the massive, gift ball deluxe being used to enclose around Kisuke and Yoruichi. Kisuke's Bankai creating this massive puppet behind him draped in a blood-red gown. The stuff with Yoruichi, her form is cool. It's cool seeing her become really powerful and absolutely take it to Askin, really smacking him around, sending him flying, shooting these lightning streaks across the air. It is just a bit of a shame, I think, the way it is executed. But overall, the rest of the fight for me is so very good. And I'm just really excited to see it brought to life in the anime. And that brings me to my number 2 pick, which I'm wondering if this might be a controversial one. But for me, this is Byakuya Kuchiki and Renji Abarai versus Sternritter F the Fear Asnot and Sternritter S the Superstar Mask de Masculine. In my opinion, the absolute pinnacle of the first Quincy invasion. I love that fight with Yamamoto, but for me, that fight feels like it's a victory lap for a character before he is obviously killed off. The Byakuya fight has this real element of despair and surprise to it that is so shocking, so almost unbelievable to witness. Byakuya and Renji, we've talked about this so many times on the channel because I do love this fight, are a duo that are almost in control of everything all the time. They always come out on top, but not here. And it's this fight that really set the tone, I think, for not only the Vandenreich as a villainous entity, but the arc in general, that it would not be as easy for the Shinigami as the Irankar arc effectively was. I think it's just a crazy, a warning, almost to the readers as much as it is to the characters, that things aren't going to be the same this time. Asnot's fear is brutally effective, and it's so crazy watching Byakuya break down mentally and then be eviscerated physically by this phantom-like new villain. And of course, one of my absolute favourite moments in the entire series is that incredibly emotional climax where Byakuya is just being shredded to near death by his own weapon, and Renji is screaming at Az to stop, desperately tries to activate his Bankai, but Master Masculine returns out of nowhere and drop kicks him across the Seirete. I mean, it's just so it's very, very powerful. It's very crazy to witness, and I just think back to when I was trying to put this list together, I just thought back to when I was reading this weekly, and that was a moment that I couldn't believe had just happened. That was something that I was I was speechless about it. And for me, that effect still lingers today. And if you include Ichigo's arrival as something of an epilogue to this battle, I mean, that is just one of the best, most emotional moments in the entire series. And so for me, while some people might look at this and think maybe it's not a real fight, I mean, it does span about 3 chapters total. It is a brutal lesson in underestimating these new Quincy. It is a brutal twist on the normal formula of Byakuya walking away from his fights generally in control, and it is kind of crushing to witness, and for that I think it is so very effective. And in many ways, that with Kyuuge OP as well, the Vandenreich were kind of put on a pedestal at the start of this arc that maybe they were hard pressed to reach again, and this fight is absolutely one of the best examples of that. And I think some anime-only viewers are going to be, pretty devastated when this moment comes around. And that is reason enough alone, that kind of emotional apex is reason enough alone for me to have it this high on my list. But number one, the absolute best fight, in my opinion, from the 1,000-year Blood War arc has to go to the honestly, fan fiction level craziness that is Ichibei Hyosabe versus Yhwach himself. If you had told Tom from, 10, 12 years ago, whatever it was, that we would eventually get a battle set in the Royal Palace between the leader of the Zero Division, who is this ancient monk with the power to erase names and powers from people, against this sealed Quincy King who has come back to reclaim his kingdom, essentially, I would never have believed you. I would never, because that sounds so absurdly awesome. It sounds like something I would have tried to have come up with as this pie in the sky thing I would have wanted to have seen. And we get it, and it's brilliant. The fight is so very good. The fight is so good that Ichibei almost makes up entirely on his own for the disappointment that was the Zero Division. And I think a lot of people would agree with that. Kubo was clearly weighing it up based on the amount of time he had for this moment in the story. Do I showcase the Zero Division in their entirety, or do I give the leader of the Zero Division a good, long fight? And that's what he went for. And, as much as I would love to see that other reality, it's hard to really argue with the man. The fight between Ichibei and Yhwach is exactly what you would expect it to be from two of the strongest beings in the entire series actually having a full-on titanic showdown. And really, this is kind of what I would have wanted from Yamamoto versus Yhwach, if it was actually him involved in that fight. And you only have to look at these two battles to kind of see how neutered the version of Yhwach is in that battle against Yamamoto. A, to show Yamamoto off, but also B, because it's not really him. But this fight between these two characters is, a spectacular. There's so many awesome abilities on show. It's constantly flowing. They both look demonic, demented, like they want to just kill each other. It's absolutely crazy. Ichibei especially is brought to life in this battle in a way that we have never seen before. Just some of the truly, truly most terrifying facial expressions of someone who is in absolute glee at bringing down his hated rival. And I could just go on and on about the incredible effects and abilities that are on display here. Yhwach summoning those massive, almost blades of light and flinging them towards Ichibei crushing them in place in front of his face, using those forbidden Kido to summon that massive dragon of wind that kind of blows away Yhwach's Blutvein and Haben ability. It's so good. It's so good. And Ichibei's Zanpakuto is off the charts creative and awesome, summoning his massive calligraphy brush, which is splashing black ink around the place all the time. Yhwach as well is no slouch in this fight, which is crucial. It's not really that one-sided. Although it does feel like Ichibei is winning basically the whole time, Yhwach is really, really trying. At the very start of this battle, Ichibei smashes Yhwach with those massive kind of ethereal hands and feet that he can summon, and he just boots him back down to the Soul Society, because that is Ichibei's plan at the start. It's not to kill him, it's just to send him flying away from the Royal Palace. But Yhwach breaks into his own throat to get his voice back and screams, Sankt Bogen at the top of his voice, this massive bow, fires an arrow through Yhwach's back and sends him flying back up to the Royal Palace. I mean, it's crazy, and they would be fools not to animate this to the absolute best of their ability. Is there anything I don't like about this battle? I mean, kind of. Again, the ending doesn't necessarily sit all that well with me. It feels like, to be honest, I've never been a big fan of the Almighty in general, so it does, to me, feel a bit cheap that Yhwach is genuinely defeated here, but he happens to have this ability that gives him another eye that makes him unable to be touched, basically, and completely reverses the battle's fortunes in a blink of an eye. I never really like that sort of thing, but at the end of the day, it is literally the very end of the fight, and it is pretty cool as well seeing Yhwach just kind of put pain to Ichibei's Futentai Satsuryo ability when he mimics his own sentence, which is really cool. And so, I like, and even with that ending, I like the kind of cyclical nature of it. You know, the fact that at the start Yhwach Bark says that he'll defeat Ichibei a few paces before the barrier that Ichibei himself has created, and in the end he actually does. It's that sort of thing that's really neat. And this fight in general, I think, will go down in history as one of those ones where Kubo probably knew that he had extreme expectations to live up to, but I think he had a really great time just showing these two powerhouses absolutely knocking each other around. And I think it's an absolute joy to see. It looks so amazing, and I can't wait to see it in the anime. But that's it for my pretty exhaustive list of my top 13 best fights from the 1000 Year Blood War arc. Let me know in the comments below, do you agree with my list at all? I'm sure there are some that you would switch around. I imagine everyone's list is going to look pretty different. But I'm pretty happy with mine. Let me know in the comments below what you think. Subscribe if you haven't done already. And as I mentioned before, check out Mr. Tomo Talks Games if you haven't done already. But until next time, guys, I'll catch you later. And I'll see you then.